This is my legacy. Welcome to this week's bonus drop. Today, Sophia Bush and her ride or die Nia Batts share what 15 years of friendship have taught them about showing up, speaking truth, and knowing when it's time to dance it out. Let's jump in.
Sophia, I want to start with you. Can you share a story or a memory from your childhood that gives us a snapshot of what it was like for you growing up?
I've thought a lot about this, and I don't know if I have a particular story or a single snapshot, but I think this is something I've been able to reflect on in our adult lives together, and certainly something that I've been thinking about as we try to figure out this sort of 100-year cycle we're in the world, where the same kinds of fear-mongering that took hold in the 1920s, it seems to be back. You know, how do you understand why, even though humans are supposed to know better, and for our friends listening at home, I'm doing the air quotes thing. Apologies, I realize you can't see me. I want to understand why people can so easily be convinced to be afraid of each other. And I think one of the things that reflecting on that has taught me to look at and really be so in awe of in my childhood, though I come with, scars and childhood trauma and all the things everybody has in their own kind of basket. The luckiest thing I have, and the thing I think my parents did so beautifully for me, was they exposed me to so much. We talk a lot about privilege, especially for white women in a world that, is acting the way it did and that voted the way it did as a voting bloc, unfortunately. My greatest privilege, I believe, is the privilege I was given growing up, the daughter of a father who is an immigrant, the daughter of a mother whose mother was an immigrant. The classic Ellis Island story, came on a boat from Italy, sort of beautiful pursuit of the American dream. And I grew up in Los Angeles in the 80s, which is such a city that is a gorgeous melting pot. It meant that in the 90s in junior high and high school, I was in Pasadena by that time, but exclusively listening to Tupac and Biggie. I got to, go to the taco trucks and go watch basketball games and grow up in my dad's art studio, surrounded by a really diverse, really queer community, where my fabulous Uncle Jeff, who was a makeup artist, was married to this gorgeous man named Winston, who did drag as Diana Ross every Saturday night. I grew up around people who are so beautifully, and what I know now as an adult, radically themselves, and I was only ever the better for it. And I think it's that privilege of exposure and that particular time where, art was just on fire a decade after women's lib began and all these other things. And I think it's probably even why when Nia and I were in our 20s and we met at a conference trying to learn from our elders and make the world a better place, why we could meet the way we did. Why I was so excited to hear about her family's story, her family's American dream, her grandfather, the postal carrier, who was a union worker who came from the kinds of history we all know that so many Black men in his age group came from, and what he built as a legacy and what her father built as a legacy and what her father taught her as a legacy, and her mom and her bonus mom and her bonus dad. I think the gift that my parents gave to me of loving people for who they are and their uniqueness is something I didn't even know how to speak on at 20, but I know how to speak on it at 40. And I realize it's the reason that I am able to have the kind of friendships and to recognize the uniqueness of this woman who is my partner in all things, and be so absolutely enamored with who she is as a person and champion who she is as a person without the kinds of jealousy or competition that, to be clear, the early aughts really tried to give to us women. And it has just never existed between us. So that's something I think I've been reflecting on a lot, particularly watching her become a mother, for me being in a phase of life where I have young children now in my home, thanks to my partner. I think we're really, really reflecting on what are we teaching, what are we giving, and what are we permitting based on how we meet the people in the world around us?
What a rich answer. And it's interesting because I was just talking to someone yesterday about just kind of where we are as humanity. And as someone that monitored the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis and skinheads for over a decade in the 90s, one of the things that I always tell people is that is when you start othering and you lose the humanity and you don't see humanity in others, that's how we start getting down that slippery slope of where we are and what's going on today, in my opinion.
If this conversation is resonating, we'd love for you to subscribe to the show and maybe share it with someone who needs to feel a little less alone today.
Nia, you have this incredible passion for activism and changing the world. Was there a certain moment or person who inspired you along the way?
Yeah, well, my parents actually met in law school, so we're both attorneys by trade. And so I think that, you know, the law, justice, systems and structures, how they work, who they're built to support, and who they are intentionally leaving out was sort of a tension and but also sort of a framework that my parents exposed me to, I think, at a very young age. I also been born and raised in Detroit, which is a majority Black city. And I, also had a solidly upper middle class background in that city as well. And so I had exposure to people that looked like me, that were doctors and lawyers who drove nice cars and lived in big houses. And also, I had exposure to every part of the city and the suburban areas that also had a different set of resources as well. So the tension between race and class, and doing so from a place that felt strong and empowered, but also privileged to some extent, was something that I always had to contend with. And my parents were very clear with me that they worked hard, their parents worked hard, and they made tremendous sacrifices to give me the opportunities and the exposure that I had. And with that comes the responsibility to do the same thing for myself, for my family, and for my community. And, our firm Union Heritage is an homage to my grandparents, and all my grandparents were in unions, postal workers, police, automotive. And so they were hardworking people. And our firm, has built a reputation over 35 years managing money for union pension funds. So this idea that, we are grateful for the hard work that we, have put in that affords us the opportunity to make deeper commitments to our community was always sort of a part of my upbringing. And this idea that even at work, like, we work for the people, we do it for the people. My mom continued to practice law, and my dad, worked in finance, but, to whom much is given, not much is expected. My dad would say, to whom much is given, much is required.
Required. Yep.
And the requirement didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a byproduct, or it existed, with having what I understood to be some relative privilege, compared to others. And I always grew up in this tension, going into the suburbs to this, this very fancy school, living in, my very stable neighborhood, and also, volunteering or running track in other, neighborhoods, and with, schools that may not have had the same level of resources. But my mom would say, you know, you need to go and run with those girls because they're the ones that are going to beat your butt when you get to state, because you have to train with the best, right? And so this idea of who is the best and what can be the best, for me, never really had any sort of direct association with sort of what people thought they had, or what you might think people have. It very much was about understanding people, being exposed to sort of what their challenges were, what their strengths were. And so I just learned very early on, um, to make your own sort of, not judgments, but assessments of people and situations. But I think that being able to do that at a very young age certainly led to being, a more resolved activist as I grew because, you know, I understood, that these systems are the way that they are because they were built this way. And it's not that the systems are broken, it's that they're functioning, and that's the problem. And I think that realization in that space is sort of where Sophia and I, at a very young age, really started to connect. And we understood that even though we were from very different backgrounds, like we were on the same time. We're like, we understand what's happening here.
Can we underscore that? I love when Nia, when you just said that the systems are not broken, they actually are functioning the way in which they are designed. So I believe true, and also so very powerful.
And I also want to just commend the two of you, Martin and Andrea, for spending your lives and, of course, your families' lives to help to upend those systems in such a substantive way.
If I may follow on to that compliment for you both, I'm going to go ahead and call Nia and I out a little bit because we've had the realization, right? We look around and we go, oh God, it's our turn. We're the adults in the room. We're not like just the kids following along. And when this came in and you all so lovingly invited us on this show, when I tell you we were back to like our 14-year-old selves, and of course as adults we're like, oh, this is going to be so exciting, and we were like, oh my God, they want us to go. We just lost it. We were like, our idols want us to come on their show, and so you've given us such. It's like our younger selves can't believe this is happening, and our adult selves are so honored to be in the room. So thank you. You and your legacy and your family and the work you all do in the world truly helps us keep going. And you also really gave us a nice 13-year-old girl squeal. So we appreciate the whole gamut.
Yeah, I'm going to do one thing because you can totally edit this out also, but I want to go and get this record that's here because I just think it's so important to be able to show you.
This tells me this is the best thing we're not going to want to edit out.
Exactly.
Whatever it is, we're excited.
Oh, it's going to be so sweet.
So Sophia and I had a business in Detroit, and my dad gave us his record collection. Well, loaned it because we played records, but this is one record that
That's what I was getting ready when I started to say the homage to Detroit. I was getting ready to say, does anyone know the history of I Have a Dream?
Wow.
We were with Gloria Steinem yesterday, and she had been at the March on Washington. We were talking about that. But for our listeners who don't know, one of the very first versions of I Have a Dream was in Detroit, Michigan, Woodward Avenue. And that is what Nia is holding an actual record recording of that. That's
My dad was here, and he was sitting in the audience, and he was actually close to the front, maybe standing. I guess we'll see the photo. But he heard Mahalia Jackson say, "Martin, tell him about the dream." And then he goes in to this portion of the speech that I think he's working through that was being workshopped for the March on Washington. But it's such a surreal moment. Like, my dad was there and actually heard that. And so anyway, we play this record. I have it in my home now. He's always looking for it. This is where it is. But
sorry, DB.
My Shinola record player made here in Detroit.
And it shows that there's no such thing as coincidence. And this entire circle, it also, I think, speaks to everything that has been poured into both of you all and how you all are each taking up the mantle and doing your part. Coretta Scott King always said that freedom is never really won. Each generation must earn its freedom. And we salute both of you all.
Yes, we do.
For continuing and doing your part in that long march towards freedom, because now it is our turn.
And I'm crying again.
I know. I can't believe it's just like, what a special and full circle moment. I mean, my birthday is January 14th. And so MLK Day, kind of every January is it's just like a very poignant moment about, thinking about what a recommitment to service looks like, even at times where it feels like really hard to keep going. And
Yeah.
I feel, like I'm in one of those moments now, where
We
it
have to
feels
hold
like
each other. We have to
we
hold
do.
each other now more than
Yeah.
ever. And that's why we also have this Realize the Dream project that the four of us collectively are working on, which is we are hoping to ignite a youth movement, but a movement in particular in this country for us to come together, stand together, and work together to realize the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. by committing 100 million hours of service collectively together by his 100th birthday in 2029.
Wow.
So,
That's great.
Sign us up.
okay.
Yeah.
We will definitely
ready.
we'll be calling you all back for that. It's going to take all of us to
It
get
really
it done.
is.
This has been such an incredible conversation. You both speak so beautifully about your chosen family. What's something you've learned from each other that you couldn't have learned anywhere else? Nia, you first.
With Sophia, I don't think there's anyone I know that can get more done in a day than she does. Um, it can sometimes feel very chaotic, but also exciting, and everything is an adventure. It's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get bagels at 7 a.m. and then go to the flea market and then do a call on the way back and then have people over and do all of these things and be at a meeting. But the stamina that she has and how fully she shows up for everyone around her, but consistently, is beautiful to watch and sometimes exhausting to watch. But I enjoy so deeply watching her do it. And I've never really met anyone like that who enjoys doing it. And it's just really fun to be around. And I think also, life can be really heavy. There's moments that feel sad. And a lot of our time together is very serious, just running our business. But it's such a reminder that you can just blow in and have 24 hours of full on fun. And I feel so grateful when we get those days together.
I love that because I was going to say you've taught me two things simultaneously, which is that my desire to say yes all the way is wonderful. You really champion that I want to go to the end of the road and see all the things and learn all the things. And you've also taught me patience can go hand in hand with that. I've learned to not feel like it's such a binary, a yes or a no. I've learned to take a breath when I want to say yes and explore why, and then also analyze what the calendar already looks like, and then figure out what we can say yes to. And it's really been so beautiful because I think I have learned to better assess the fullness of life, watching the way she operates. And I also just love that sometimes, we were in Austin for almost a week for South by Southwest, and our schedule was absolutely chaotic but wonderful. And there was one night where she looked at me and said, "I love you, but I'm absolutely not doing that." And I was like, "Got it."
Yeah.
And then the next night we went to see Anderson .Paak at midnight. And I was
That's
like, "Look at
true.
that. Look
Yeah,
at that. We're not going to
that's
do
true.
this so we can do this other thing." And you were correct. And I love that about us.
Yeah, I think life is a grand adventure, and that's how we've always lived it. It's like that Zora Neale Hurston quote, there's years that ask question and years that answer. And we've had these years of yes, where it was this year is about making sure that we're saying yes to as many things as we can. And then immediately by the time we got to the next year, we're like, this year is about learning boundaries and what we have to say no to. But what's interesting is we're always kind of exploring those themes together and in tandem, and it leads to a rich full life that again can be very, very adventurous. And then I'm the person that presents as an extrovert, but I'm actually an introvert, so that dynamic is also what you're experiencing. But
Yeah.
damn, it's fun, and I'm so grateful to be able to do it with her.
I can't think of a better way to end than that. Sincerely, I just love the tribute between the two of you there. And I love the quote, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. So thank you for sharing your legacy with us today.
Thank you for joining us. New episodes drop every Wednesday with bonus content every Thursday. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss a moment.